Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Very happy to be here and to moderate this session. Sorry for being late. I'm Rabia Farouki. I'm Director of Knowledge, Policy and Finance at IRENA. And I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of some of the work before giving the floor to Ms. Simpson for her speech. So just as an introduction, you must know that IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Agency, is working on a scenario towards 1.5 degrees. The technology pathway is translated through a modeling exercise that we've been doing for close to 10 years now into socioeconomic variables, GDP, jobs, welfare, and we try to see along the different supply chains what are the opportunities to leverage local capabilities, what kind of industrial policies we can introduce and implement in order to gain value locally in different contexts. So the other aspect that I would like just to briefly mention is that we have been doing at IRENA surveys, gender surveys, where we have been looking at the role of women in renewable energy. We had first a global survey done in 2019, then one on wind energy. The last one we launched 2 weeks ago is on women in solar PV. Finally, I would like to also highlight the fact that we have been working on this comprehensive policy framework for many years, where we clearly show that beyond deployment policies, it is really important to look at related policies around labor markets, around industrial policies, as I said, around social policies, etc., in order to maximize benefits from the energy transition. So I will cut the presentation here, given the time constraint, and I would like to welcome Ms. Kadri Simpson for her remarks on decentralized solar energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabia, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the EU Pavilion to talk about and think about the solar. Let me start by clarifying the mysterious title of this event, Accelerating Solar Energy, a ribbon at a time. Some of you might have recognized a poem by Emily Dickinson, which starts with these words. I'll tell you how the sun rose, a ribbon at a time. If we transpose this to the context of today's topic, we could say that the world changes a panel at a time. And it is happening in the European Union as we speak. 2022, the year of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, will be a record year for solar PVs, with roughly 40 gigawatts of installations of new capacity. 3/4 of this record level of deployment will be driven by small, decentralized rooftop installations. So EU citizens have seen that a good way to reduce their energy bills is to invest in solar energy. And thus, one panel at a time, the EU is reducing its exposure to the price volatility and the weaponization of fossil fuel energy export from Russia. Renewables and energy savings provide solutions in the short term, while at the same time helping to achieve our longer-term climate goals. They are two key pillars of our strategy to reduce our dependence on Russian fossil fuels, which we have called REPowerEU. And this strategy includes increasing renewables share in our energy mix. So we will increase our renewable share to the 45% by 2030. And using the full potential of solar energy will be key in this context. In our estimate, achieving our energy independence and emission reduction goals requires 4-fold increase in the solar PV capacity installed over the current decade. And this is our aim with this recently launched EU solar strategy. In it, the Commission has proposed the European Solar Rooftop Initiative with a legally binding solar rooftop obligation for certain buildings. This will be rolled out gradually over the coming years, starting with new public and commercial buildings. And to implement solar projects faster, we are also accelerating permit granting procedure for renewable energy, including small rooftop solar installations. And of course, to accelerate solar PV deployment, we rely on the ability to scale up solar PV technology, production, and manufacturing. And therefore, we have launched the Solar PV Industry Alliance to bring together key sectoral players to develop an action plan for the supply chain that will support the rapid deployment plans of solar PVs. But enough about the EU. Solar energy is a key technology all around the world, and it's one of the cheapest solutions to generate electricity and provide heat in almost all the countries. And this year, the threshold of 1 terawatt of solar energy generation capacity installed worldwide was finally reached. And the next terawatt will probably take just a few years. Manufacturing capacity is increasing even further, and prices are stable despite the high inflation. Solar panels are a modular solution, adaptable to all circumstances and all needs, from countries with very dense electricity grids to regions where energy needs are best covered through local self-sufficient solutions. And most of the countries suffering from severe energy poverty and exclusion have abundant solar resources. So we are working together to tackle the financing, regulatory and other bottlenecks that today still prevent many countries and regions to make the best use of these solar resources. In February this year, during the 6th EU-African Union Summit, the Commission presented the Africa-EU Green Energy Initiative to support Africa's green transition in the energy sector by increasing renewable energy capacity and the number of people gaining access to affordable and reliable energy. And in addition, as part of the Global Gateway EU-Africa investment package, the EU will support the development of regional electricity markets across the 5 continental African power pools through technical assistance and funding for electricity interconnections and the transmission lines. And it is a pleasure and a privilege for the EU to host events like this to exchange ideas on how the energy transition can be best achieved for the world as a whole. And I'm grateful to the International Solar Alliance, our partner today, for all the important work they are doing globally to advance this goal. In solar energy, we have a key technology that can be deployed on a small or big scale, depending on the local needs. So let's ensure we all make the most of it. And we all can make the best of the rising sun, a ribbon at the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kadri. Thank you for your continuous enthusiasm and optimism that we all need in these days. So I'm really very happy to have a distinguished panel who will give us insights into this discussion. And I will start with Monsieur Éric Piolet, who is the mayor of Grenoble, and got involved in public life in 2009 after a career spent as a senior executive in the industry. Eric, Grenoble is a pioneering city in many ways, and in particular known for local democracy, development of soft mobility, such as pedestrianization, cycling, and public transport, local and organic food, which I hear is also quite on the, in trendy, So also its commitment to fight against poverty and some quite ambitious actually policies to fight air pollution. So the question is, what incentives are needed to basically democratize the energy system? And what business models can promote the development of the decentralized electricity systems? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Maybe a few words to come back in the 19th century, because actually Grenoble was one of the start of the hydroelectricity in 1882. And at that time, so it was this electricity was produced based on private initiatives. And then, obviously, those private initiatives pop up everywhere, and there was a need for interconnection. And then, after the Second World War, France decided to nationalize the energy sector. And now, what we see popping up is a new trend, a new area where actually all local players start to become both consumer, of course, but as well producer. And for us as a local community, it's very key to be able to have a power to act in this area. And so we are very proud of this history of Grenoble, now more than 140 years of effort in the energy system. And actually it's what I've produced as well, the really expansion of the Grenoble University, where I made my study myself before working for 18 years in the industry. And so we connect now based on an enterprise that is owned by the local council. We developed a strategy to reduce consumption first, and obviously to produce nuclear energy. And so by the end of the year, this year to 2022, we will produce as green electricity, 100% green electricity, meaning neither fossil nor nuclear, the equivalent of the consumption of Grenoble people. And so we do so by creating a framework. That's why we wanted to be a European Green Capital, and that the European Union chose us as a European Green Capital for 2022, because we want to create a framework where local communities develop and the public power develop itself a strategy, and where private sector and citizens can engage. And as you said, we are very engaged in democracy, local democracy, and citizen partnership. And they created as well a cooperative for electricity production. And so we provide them with the roof for public buildings, and they install on those roofs, they install public photovoltaic central. And now they have 18. And so it's a real momentum, because that's where you can connect the fight against, or the mitigation for climate change, with local interest. Otherwise, we work for what we should do, but then it has a direct impact on our daily life, because we see the return on our effort. It makes sense. Obviously, it's very important, but as well, we have an economy around, and we can have really work on consumption and production at the same time.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to hear, because especially when you come from the academic world, you think that all of these are concepts. Like there's this whole trend of participatory economics, and this is really participatory economics at play. So that's a very nice, I think, it showcases the possibility of different models of democracy, basically. Thank you so much. I mean, since we're talking about the regulatory and sort of business environment, I'm going to go to you, Valborga. Valborga Hermetsberger is the CEO of Solar Power Europe, and she has been working in Brussels for more than 18 years in different positions, most of the time, I think, in the energy sector. And before joining Solar Power Europe, Valburga headed the Verbund representation office in Brussels and was member of Hydrogen Europe, among many other things. So, staying in this topic of regulatory and business environment to expand solar development, we wanted to know a little bit about the legal framework that is needed to develop community-based investment in renewable electricity and the sharing of the electricity that is generated.
Thanks very much for having me here today. I'm really very happy to be on the panel with you, Rabia, because you were mentioning one report that Irina is doing, and I just want to start with that. Which is how many women are working in solar, because you didn't mention how many you found there are, which is 40%, and as it's the Gender Day of COP today, I think it's worth mentioning 40% of women are working in the solar sector, which is great. So, answering your question, let me maybe first of all tell you that there's really great business models we see out there which are pushing for more solar to be installed. So the key business model, obviously, and that's what you were referring to already, is self-consumption, where we see more and more people taking energy in their own hands, but also collective self-consumption, which is also making that more roofs are used, or more space on roofs is used, not only for your own consumption, but sharing it also with others. And then the third business model I also wanted to mention is energy as a service. Where third parties are coming in. For example, if you don't have the means to invest on your own roof or on infrastructure close to you, so someone else is doing it for you, making this investment, you can profit because you can consume the energy, and after some time it belongs to you. And solar has a lifetime of 30, 40 years, so it's really great to see all these business models emerging. Now, if you ask me about the legislative framework which is needed, so we need to have a legislative framework which is making it attractive to self-consume and to also use the electricity. So we need to, for example, reduce taxes and fees on energy bills. We also need to look at the investments for those vulnerable customers who cannot make these investments. So we need to help those who cannot make these initial investments, because in the end, it is paying off very, very quickly, and even more so with the energy prices which we see today. But sometimes this initial investment is a bottleneck, and the IEA, for example, at the beginning of the energy crisis was proposing that we would use the recovery and resilience money we have in order to pay, for example, 20% upfront of investments of those who cannot afford to install solar. So I think this is a very good idea in order to bring solar forward. So these are just one of a couple of ideas. Financing, when it comes to energy communities, also plays a role, obviously, where it's important to share best practices of also municipalities coming in, kickstarting energy communities, so that the financing world can see that these new ideas are working and getting more confidence also in financing these kind of models. So a couple of ideas, but happy to discuss further on some aspects.
Thank you so much, Valburga. And maybe also facilitating the administrative process, which has been one of the major bottlenecks in the field. And thank you for mentioning the gender study. I was very worried about the third survey, because the global number was 32% for renewables in general. Then we got 21% for wind, so not very good. So we were very happy to see that the results of solar PV were 40%, which brings about the average to around 30. So well done for the solar industry. Thank you again, and I'm going to go now to Joshua Wycliffe, who is COO of the International Solar Alliance, and You bring with you a long experience of international development, public service, environmental, local government, and infrastructure expertise. And we obviously need to massively scale up solar energy capacity and also to deliver universal energy access to meet the emission reduction targets. So what skills need to be developed to accelerate the uptake of decentralized solar technologies? Sorry.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, along with my fellow panelists, it's a great privilege to be here this afternoon, to be able to share ISA's perspective, the International Solar Alliance's perspective, in terms of how we could decentralize and grow solar power. The International Solar Alliance specializes in being able to facilitate the solar sector growth in especially small island development states, as well as the LDCs, the least developed countries. We've all seen that solar sector and the solar energy is a versatile technology that will be able to be transported, and one of the best in case that can provide decarbonization at the most economical rates, at the most as the quickest part to be transported and being installed. The synergies between solar technologies and the emerging technologies like the green hydrogen are quite a few. So we are able to work in synergy and in tandem, and they cannot be overlooked as it grows. Ladies and gentlemen, we see that solar energy, solar sector is going to be growing at a huge rate, at about $293 billion worth in the market by 2028. And ISA recently released 3 reports, which last month. One was the World Solar Technology Report, the Market Report, and the Investment Report. And it clearly shows that the penetration of the solar market and the expansion of the market seems to have done well in intense populaces around the world. One of those challenges that we face is remote, small island state communities where the expansion of solar energy finds itself in a difficult spot and more challenging. And last year was a record growth year, which went up to 191 gigawatt, and it shows that we will be growing. But the growth into remote markets remains as a challenge. However, focusing at decentralized technologies would go a long way in being able to go into remote markets and remote regions. Like, for example, the mini-grid. I'll give an example. I'm aware of a small island development state in the Pacific, a country which has more than 300 islands, a country made up of 300 remote islands, many of them resort islands, islands that are created with resorts and communities of employees who work with the resorts. Some of these resorts function on diesel gensets and energize the homes of employees and homes of the families in the communities utilizing gensets or no light at all. And the International Solar Alliance's mission is to light up every nook and corner of the world, every home, every community. And decentralizing solar energy, solar power, is a great means of being able to expand and grow the solar sector. And how we do it is through mini-grids and being able to reach out. And just as much as I showed, how it goes is by having a mini-grid in a community, you don't not only energize the resort, but also the surrounding communities. This Pacific Island, a small island development state, has done remarkably well by modeling something like this as a mini-grid into technologies and communities. One of those things that these small island development states and many countries face is, like my colleague in the panel said, is being able to have a situation where the regulatory framework, the legislative framework can be put in place. And the International Solar Alliance works with its member states, 110 member states, in being able to provide support in the regulatory framework, in being able to provide administrative framework in terms of, for instance, a small thing in terms of billing. And so when we do the billing, a smart billing within small communities where a mini-grid is put in place, the growth starts provides environmental benefits, it provides socio-economic benefits, the ESG outtake from these regions excel. And that's what happens, and with the help of the local community groups, the municipal corporations, the town councils, we are able to provide good governance as well. So when you look at the ESG aspect of the growth, it excels very well, and the percentage of growth goes up as well. On the technical front, decentralized solar generation projects provide planning flexibility quicker. Unlike large projects and powerhouses, it's able, the small size and the short construction lead times compared to large central power companies is a great thing to go about, and it is a sweetener to policymakers and decision makers, because for policymakers and the politicians, it becomes something that you could showcase immediately or in the short term, rather than having 5-year, 10-year projects that take a long lead time. So despite these, the challenges of deploying the systems, like I mentioned a minute ago, remains with the regulatory framework issues, remains with the administrative issues, and organizations like us, the International Solar Alliance, specialize in being able to provide exactly that input. Before I close, I'd like to also mention about a special product that the International Solar Alliance has been able to introduce in terms of facilitating. We launched last week what we called SolarX, a product that will finance, that will provide risk mitigation, and also a payment guarantee mechanism, making sure that the private sector is able to look at even these remote markets, remote regions, and provide a guarantee mechanism, payment guarantee mechanism, so they're able to invest into these remote regions through being able to decentralize and build on the businesses. Lastly, ISA, the International Solar Alliance, has also launched a product on regulatory framework. We've got specialists, regulatory specialists in-house who work with the various legislative groups across the globe and help them build the capacity in being able to bring legislative and regulatory framework into these small island development states and the LDCs to be able to bring in projects that are able to accelerate solar energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, I've been asking myself a question. We come to this COP every year, and then we go to, I don't know how many events a year, and we've been saying for the past, I'm old enough to say 25, 30 years, regulatory framework, finance requirements, and we're moving, and we were moving in the right direction maybe, but it's far, far from being enough. So, okay, what is it? And now we're taking a few steps back, actually. So what is missing? I mean, we've seen investments go to very risky environments. Okay, there is a risk-return question there, but still to very risky requirements with no regulatory framework and still investing there. So what is it? What is behind all that? I think is not a question we should ask ourselves, since we know what the technology is. We know what kind of regulations we need. We know that fine. Everybody tells us money is there. So what is it? What is missing there? What is the, you know, at the smaller level, maybe Eric can tell us at the community level what is working, but what is missing?
You're right that it's sometimes very frustrating to see just the trends and to see how slow we are, and that's what we try to do in Grenoble, being as fast as we can, so that we can base our action on social justice. I think that's one of the key showstopper today for not going fast enough. It's because there is a part which is still ignorance, obviously, and the carbon budget is still miles away from a lot of politician maker head. But there is really, on top of our addiction to consumption, there is really this denial on social justice. And so what we we see there in that, for instance, for collective auto consumption, we had fights in France for already many years, and we were able 5 years ago to change the regulation. But even so, the details in the administration past work is really made to slow down the auto consumption projects. And so what we miss at local basis, what we would like and what we expect maybe from European Union is to deliver directly money to local governments where projects are popping up. But we need huge investment, but there it's a consensus because that's where people see a return on their effort. So they are not just dealing to mitigate climate change, they will see the result of their effort, and it makes sense for them. But obviously, having return on their effort, those return will be made on top of on the place of people today capturing money and actually destroying life on Earth. And so there is a fight. Really a fight, and going local enable us to have the vast majority of the people behind us rather than having to fight against a few people and on top of some national lobbies or government.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. I'm going to go to Aaron Cheng now, who is the CEO of Power Gen. I really like the description that you have on the website, which is human and customer-centric approach to growth. So maybe you can give us your insight as a renewable energy developer. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here. So we're a renewable energy company operating across Africa. We provide clean, reliable, and affordable power, and we're currently serving over 125,000 people. So we provide maybe a very specific perspective and context related to the African continent. But you may ask, why does the EU care about this? We are actually funded by the European Commission, which has set up a fund called Electrify, and they're one of our great and grateful backers. The continent of Africa has more than 1 billion people without reliable power today. And that, with the population growth on the continent, will soon be about 40% of the world's population. And so I think it is a very relevant conversation to the EU and to our audience here today. Because there's lack of reliable electricity on the continent, there's more than actually 100 gigawatts of distributed diesel capacity in Africa. So there's a huge amount of incumbent diesel generation existing because of the lack of a reliable grid and hydropower, nuclear, and other sources of energy. So the energy access story and the energy transition story actually go hand in hand on the continent of Africa, and it is important to all of us with the population growth. A few of the points that our fellow panelists hit on earlier I think are really relevant to what we do. Joshua mentioned mini grids, and we do a lot of mini grids. We also do a lot of energy as a service directly to large off-takers, large industrial and commercial clients on the continent. But what's important to us is that we're both providing reliable power at affordable rates to our consumers, but also doing it in as clean of a manner as possible to help with the transition. Happy to talk a little bit more about our work that we do, but certainly the incentives question, the regulatory question, the why aren't we moving fast enough question, all very relevant to us as well.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I have a question from the audience to Ms. Valburga. How many years are needed to train PV installers? Do we have enough people for the next years?
That's an excellent question. Thanks very much for the questions, because indeed, let me start with the opportunities. There is great opportunities out there for solar jobs, not just installers, but jobs in general. We just recently did our second job study showing that by 2030 we can already have more than 1 million jobs in our sector from the 470 we have today. So this is great opportunities, and many of these jobs, or the bulk of these jobs, will be installers. So talking about opportunities, the challenge now is to get all these people, get these jobs filled. And installers today, I mean, it depends a little bit on the different regulatory schemes, certification schemes in different countries, but it's around about 2 to 3 years to get an installer trained. But so first of all, what we need to do is attract more people to take that training and get certified. It needs to be more attractive to have that manual job. It needs to be attractive to young people, to climate activists, to roll up their sleeves and help us get this solar on the roofs and everywhere else. So that is one thing. It needs to be attractive. We need to work together with training institutes, with universities. And the second thing is that we also might want to think about getting smarter when it comes to installations. For example, have bulk installations, have whole neighborhoods installing solar, because that is efficiencies that you can use where you need less workforce. Also, for example, if you're renovating or if you're building buildings, the construction workers can do parts of the work, so that the electricians, the installers, electrical contractors can come in at the end in order to connect the solar panel. So there's different things you can do, but bottom line is we need to attract much more workers to our sector, not just installers, but all kinds of jobs, because there's huge growth ahead.
So Vaboga, the 400,000 is Europe, right? Because globally we find in our annual jobs review at ARENA that it's about 4.2 million, according to our estimates globally.
Yeah,
so
that's our
Europe.
European numbers.
Yeah.
So 470,000 people working in solar today. And by 2030, depends a little bit on what numbers you're looking at. The European Commission's number, 750 gigawatt goal by 2030, will get us to more than 1 million jobs. If we're even more ambitious, we're talking about being faster and scale up more quickly. So we do think that we can even reach 1 terawatt of solar by 2030. Also, given what we're seeing happening on the ground at this point in time. And that would even get us to 1.5 million jobs in 2030.
And those are direct jobs, I presume,
Direct
right?
and indirect jobs.
And
both,
indirect,
yeah.
right. So on top of that, you have the induced jobs that the sector can create, which are, of course, very important. I have another question from the audience to Eric. And that's, what is the impact of the city's finances of this energy strategy?
It depends, actually. Through the company that we own, we were able to rent this money out, so it didn't have a direct impact on local finance. But now we reach a point where actually we are those days in discussion to say if we raise taxes for for maybe 30% of the population, so the healthier part of in terms of economy of the population, so that we can continue at that same speed and actually go faster in terms of transition. And so I think it's a point where you cannot turn around for all time. You need to go to say that, of course, during this transition, you need to reduce inequalities, and therefore you need to have a stronger contribution from the healthier people so that we can continue this path. And that was what was provided as well during those IPCC report in the second turn. The work group 2 of IPCC, clearly we need inequality reduction, and actually when we go to raise tax for the healthier people in terms of economic, I tell them there is two benefits. The first one, obviously, that we need this money to help transition, and the second is that at the present time, it's with your money that you actually emit a lot of greenhouse gas, and therefore you will reduce mechanically your greenhouse gas emission. So we win on both sides, and therefore I think that's where we need to go. That's why I was saying that it's really connected to social justice.
So yeah, absolutely. But so there's another question for you, which is, but very briefly, what would you need to cover every roof in the city with PV? So maybe I should just mention that we have a very nice application at ARENA, the Solar City Simulator, which allows you to actually see the potential, even the tariffication required for both commercial and household level rooftop PV. So in case you're interested, you can check the ARENA website.
Yes.
And just very quickly, please.
So on public roof, at the present time, we are going quite fast, but we balance as well with where we can do urban agriculture. We go for that as well. So we have roof going for urban agriculture and roof going for solar. But obviously, so the break there is the money. We would need more money to go faster in this area and be able to cover all the roofs that we can. The other part is on private roof, where actually it's much more complex there, because we have developed a system where we bring engineering for those private buildings, so that the people can discuss together already to come to an agreement, because you need all the owners coming to an agreement, both to refurbish the building and reduce its consumption, and to install solar energy on the roof.
So a matter of financing.
Yeah.
Aaron, there's a question for you. Any valuable examples from Europe for your job, or completely different issues?
I think there are many valuable examples and learnings that we've pulled from various different parts of the world. There are some very African context-specific situations as well, but I think there's a lot of valuable learnings. I'd love to speak to you later, Eric, and learn about how you guys have done it. For us, I think the permitting journey is one that there's been a lot of learnings from. And organizations like the World Bank and the IFC, who are here at the conference, I think have pulled a lot of learnings over time. You talked maybe earlier about simplifying permitting processes, but because we are looking at distributed, decentralized systems that move a lot faster than 500 megawatt projects, it does require a different permitting system. And so that's something that we've been working with governments and donors alike to try to bring to the continent as well. Happy to share more, but maybe I'll just pause there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe I'll go back to Joshua, and maybe you can just give us an example of some of the practical activity or initiatives that you have at ISA that supports decentralized solar.
Thank you. Very good question. So I did give one of the examples of how we work on decentralized mini-grids in small island states, where the islands are remote and it work hundreds of kilometers away from the mainland, and how decentralized mini-grids work and provide and energize small communities. Apart from that, the recent pandemic saw countries lose, especially the countries that relied on tourism, lose hundreds of thousands of jobs around the world. And so one of those things that they did is they went back to their communities and went back to agriculture and agricultural exports. And they started, one of the countries that we have worked with recently, their GDP expanded and their exports grew by about 11% only because the agricultural exports increased. And so how we did was to provide a new sector product in being able to decentralize remote agriculture and provide sustainable agricultural solutions, where we provided and facilitated solar energized sustainable agricultural plant and equipment. So they were able to provide sustainable agriculture into it, so they didn't have to rely on electricity or diesel gensets, but also be able to adapt to solar energized agricultural equipment. So we're able to sustain that sector. Another area is disaster-prone territories, especially, again, small island states where you have, due to climate change, you have erosion, coastal erosion. Being able to provide solar energized lighting to those communities by decentralizing and providing mini-grids also has helped. So these are some of the practical examples that ISA has been involved in the recent past.
Thank you, Joshua. We have 5 minutes for panelists. I'm just going to give you 1 minute each to answer a simple question, which is, in the best of all worlds, what would you wish, from governments to further the deployment of decentralized solar? Maybe we can start with Babulga.
Very happy to, because we just see the European Commission proposing indeed to go faster and put forward emergency measures in order to deploy renewables faster, not just decentralized, but also big power plants. So the key to it is permitting, accelerate permitting as fast as you can. So when it comes to rooftop solar, rooftop can be installed in one day, basically. Where we're seeing, things slowing down is indeed the permitting. So that is something, and then also repower as much as you can, because there's all solar plants which can be repowered very quickly, which can also be hybridized, meaning that you can also co-locate wind storage in order to drive up the capacity. So these are things which can be done very quickly and which can help us out for the next winter. And we should see these kind of activities continued, because what is at stake is these 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we need to move fast.
Thank you. 1 minute, Aaron?
Sure. Mine is quite similar. To use kind of your analogy, it would take us only a few weeks to build 1 megawatt of solar, but it takes probably a year to work through the different hurdles of permitting and raising financing. So I guess our ask to governments would be to simplify programs and processes. The second ask would be to look at incentivizing storage or grid investments, grid improvements. But solar works critically with storage to provide a base load, or with the grid to provide a base load. And so that's often really, really important to provide 24/7 base load power. Storage is ultimately still one of the most expensive components of the power value chain. Those are my
Thank
two.
you, Aaron, for keeping to the 1 minute. Joshua?
Our ask for the governments would be, if you want to uptake a quick environment where you could have the ease of doing business and be able to decentralize, would be to be quicker and faster and responsive to regulatory changes, legislative changes. So not just the willingness, but like you said earlier, action on the ground, to be able to take help and be able to bring legislative reforms, to be able to provide and close those gaps and be able to provide access to energy.
Thank you, Joshua. Last but not least, Eric, you have
Yes.
a bit more than a minute.
Oh, that's fine. 1 minute. I would like two things, man, for my government and maybe one for European Union. So the one for European Union, I will start by this, is trusting local government and actually developing programs, working directly with cities, because that's where project goes. And for my local government, I would say remove all the administrative burdens that actually today still hurt auto consumption and collective auto consumption, so that we can speed up this frame for the private sector and deliver back money to local governments, so that we can produce projects that really create a momentum with people, because they see the project, they see the return, and they see that they cope with both doing something useful for the planet and doing something useful for them.
Thank you very much. I'd like you to join me in applauding for our panelists. We made it within the time given to us by the organizers. Thank you again.